Hi friends! Today we're going to talk about 10 common Alocasia varieties. And some of them you heard about it, some of them you haven't. But one thing they have in common is that you don't really need to go far to find them, because they're going to be at your local plant shop or in a big box store or even in a convenience store. If you're new here, my name is Larissa, and in this channel we try to make plant parenting easier by explaining how plants work. So if you know Alocasias, you know there is a bunch of very different varieties out there. And to make things simple, I decided to classify them into 3 separate groups. And just a disclaimer, this is not an official classification by any means. This is just the way I found to make it easier for you and for me to understand different types of Alocasia that is out there. So the first group is what I call African masks. The second group is what I call dragon scales. And the third group is what I called elephant ears. And we're gonna walk you through each one of them. First one, African masks. This is a group I created for the plants that have kind of pointy ears and they kind of look like a mask. So African mask is one of the many names for Alocasia, and if you look at closely you can kind of see the shape of a mask. Anyways, they are more on the medium size. We have like some small versions. So let's start with the Alocasia Polly. So this is the plant that people have in mind when they talk about Alocasias. This is the plant you can find everywhere, and to me they are the easiest type of Alocasia to care for. Usually you're gonna find them in this kind of medium size with like big leaves. And now we have the Alocasia Bambino, and we have a video explaining the differences between the Polly and the Bambino, and a whole mess that we got into when we got a Bambino that we thought it was a Polly and it was not growing. But basically the Bambino is a smaller version of the Polly, and it's more pointy and it has usually more leaves. If you want an Alocasia that is bushier or smaller and more compact, that is not gonna grow much, go for Alocasia Bambino. This, at least here in Toronto, we can find in many plant shops and even in some convenience stores. And then the last one we have here is the Alocasia Zebrina. So the Alocasia Zebrina is a little bit on the tall side, and it got this name because of the stripes in the stem. And this is one of the types of African masks that can grow really tall. It's a beautiful plant. It's not that easy to find, but we did find some in some plant shops. And the most surprising thing is that this is actually a variegated Alocasia Zebrina. So super rare, but it was like a happy coincidence. I believe when we got this, it wasn't variegated. That's the Alocasia look. The second group is what I call dragon scales. You can see why. So these plants, they all have very thick leaves, and the texture kind of resemble leather, like almost like the skin of a dragon, because it has like these marks. The plants you see here are on the smaller side, and that's because these plants are a little bit harder to find. So a lot of times you're only gonna find a small version of it in your local plant shop at a higher price, but they can grow leaves as big as the Alocasia Polly. It's just that the versions that you're gonna see out there are probably the smaller type. When it comes to caring for these plants, I feel like they're a little bit more fragile than the Alocasia Polly, but I think it's also because we have smaller, younger versions of it. And I think when the plant gets bigger and more established, things get easier. I killed my share of dragon scales, and you might kill it too. So it's part of life. Anyway, let's talk about each one of them. So this is a dragon scale. This is actually the name of this plant, and that's why I named this group dragon scale. And you can see why. This it's almost like a Godzilla skin. This plant was the hardest to find, all the three of this. We were able to find a very big nursery that we have in the Greater Toronto area, and it was the most expensive of all the alocasias we have. Let me know in the comments if that's the case in the city you live in, and if you can find all of these plants very easily, or if you've never seen one of these before. But anyways, it's a super cute plant. And the second one is the silver dragon. Very similar to the dragon scale, but it has like a more silvery color, a little bit of a white silver type of green. This plant was a little bit easier to find compared with this one. You're probably not gonna find this in a big box store, but if you go to a local plant shop, they are likely to have these ones and possibly small versions like this one. Last, this is the black velvet. This is my favorite alocasia of all times. They have this really dark type of leaves. The name comes from the texture of it, because it's not as shiny as the other alocasias. If you touch it, it kind of feels like velvety, but the shape of the leaves is really similar to the other ones. These used to be really easy to find here in Toronto, but we haven't seen a lot of them, and I don't know why all the black velvets we see out there are very sick, and I don't know what's going on. But you're gonna be able to find this in a local plant shop or in a specialized nursery, a big nursery also. So these are like a most exotic, harder to find types of alocasia. And the third group is the elephant ears. This group are the massive alocasias. So I put in this group plants that can grow really tall, because the alocasias, when they are in nature, when they are planted in soil, when they are growing in a tropical country, they can grow to 10 feet tall. Elephant ears is the name of this kind of alocasia. There's a reason for that. First, the shape of the leaf. It looks a little bit like the African mask, but it's like a little bit wider in here. And also, when alocasias are planted in soil and they have the perfect condition, they grow so big that the leaf can actually grow the size of the ears of an elephant. That's the true nature of alocasia, not the ones that we have like tiny plant pots in our houses. But basically, we only have one of these plants here. The reason being, I cannot fit the other plants in my apartment, let alone in the frame. It's not really easy to find the big types of alocasia for sale here in Canada. One reason being, we cannot plant them outside because they would just die during the winter. The most famous type of elephant ears massive alocasia is the Taro, and we're gonna give you some pictures of that. The Taro is also called Alocasia Macrorrhiza, and Taro is actually the corm. So alocasias can have corms, and you have a little alocasia, you have like tiny corms. When you have an alocasia that is like 8 feet tall, you're gonna have a corm that is this size, and people actually eat that in Hawaii. They use it in some dishes and they call it taro. That's where it comes, the name of the plant. And this is not exactly a taro. This is called Kuching mask, but this is the daughter of a taro. So this plant was patented in 2020 by a guy in Louisiana, a guy named Brian Paul Williams. And what he was trying to do is to have a smaller version of a taro that people could put in their backyards or even have inside, because the taro is one of the biggest types of alocasia, and it grow up to 15 feet tall. So he crossed a taro with a smaller type of alocasia. He created this plant. It's a smaller version of a taro that can grow only to 8 feet tall. You can maybe have it inside your apartment if you have a very large vase, or you can try to keep it smaller and contained like this one and hope for the best. There's another type of plants that I included in this classification that is a very popular one called Regal shield. And the Regal shield is a plant that people love to use as decor, as like this big statement plant. And we also have a bonus plant for you, the Alocasia purple sword, because we cannot fit this plant anywhere in this classification, so it's bonus. I think this plant, the best place to put it would be with the African masks, because it kind of looks like, has these pointy ears, but it grows really long leaves and it has a little bit of purple coloration to it. That's why it's named purple sword. But this is another plant that is getting a little bit more popular, and you may even be able to find it in a big box store, as we did. But let's recap. We have the African mask group that has the Alocasia Polly, the Alocasia Bambino, the Alocasia Zebrina, and also the Alocasia Friedeck. We have the second group of dragon scales that all plants look like leather or dragon skin, and is the dragon scale, the silver dragon, and the black velvet. And we have the big elephant ears, that is the Taro, the Kuching mask, and the Regal shield. So that's all we have for today. If you like this video, you're gonna love our Alocasia playlist where we talk all about Alocasias. And that's all. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye!